Now, a source familiar with discussions inside the president's legal team says it's Mr. Trump who is directing the political strategy of going after the special counsel's office. This source described the strategy as, quote, bad for the country and likely to get worse. The White House did not respond to that and referred us to Rudy Giuliani. And as for the White House demand for an apology to the president, it's important to note, Wolf, the president rarely ever apologizes for his behavior, whether it's calling Mexican immigrants rapists or peddling the lie for years that Barack Obama was not born in the U.S. when, of course, he was. Wolf.
Yes, he was. Jim Acosta, thank you. Now to the criminal investigation of the president's longtime personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. Cohen's team confirming today in open court that Mr. Trump's fixer recorded conversations with clients, tapes now being held under lock and key. Stormy Daniels' attorney is claiming without proof that the president is on those tapes. Let's go to our national correspondent, Bryn Gingras. She's covering all the developments in New York City for us. Bryn, so what do we know about these recordings?
Well, Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' attorney, made those claims outside the courtroom based on what happened inside the courtroom. But outside the courtroom, he called them Trump tapes. And as you said it, he's claiming that there are recordings between Trump and Cohen that have not been released, though he won't say why he knows that or what's really on those tapes. And he's also saying there are recordings of other people having conversations with Michael Cohen. And he's really demanding that all of those tapes be released. Take a listen.
Our understanding is that there's many audio recordings that for whatever reason Michael Cohen created and then kept, and ultimately they will be his downfall and it may be the downfall of this president.
And again, he's making these claims outside the courtroom based on what happened inside the courtroom. And that was that Cohen's attorney said that they might have recordings out there. And that's the first time we've really heard that claim. And we're talking about recordings in that trove of documents that was seized by the FBI in that raid of Michael Cohen's home and his office and his hotel room. But it's important to note, Wolf, this was somewhat of a sideshow to what really happened in court today. And that was an update on the documents in that FBI raid. And Michael Cohen's attorney said that they've received more than 3 million items and that they've only been able to process about 1 million as of now to determine if attorney-client privilege is compromised. They said they wanted more time to do that, and the judge really gave them a deadline of June 15th. And the truth is they haven't even received all the documents. We learned today that there's 2 cell phones that the investigators haven't been able to access, and also some materials from a shredder, all of which now is with forensics down in Quantico with the FBI. So it's going to be a while before they even receive all of those documents that they need to review, Wolf.
And Bryn, the judge in this case also scolded Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, Michael Avenatti has wanted a seat at the table through this whole thing. He wanted his hands on the documents as well because he thinks that there might be some attorney-client privilege issues with his own client, Stormy Daniels. So he's fought for that. Well, today in court, when he spoke up, the judge basically scolded him and saying that, you're going on a publicity tour and he needs to stop. Well, outside of court, we saw those comments he made about the quote-unquote Trump tapes. And then soon after that, he filed a motion saying that he didn't want to be a part of this process, a part of this court proceedings as of now. So it was certainly a drama-filled day in court, Wolf.
Certainly was. Bryn Gingras reporting for us from New York. Thank you. In the Russia investigation tonight, we're also learning about a serious split on a key Senate panel. Republicans and Democrats apparently at odds over one of the most significant questions. Was there collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign? Let's go to our senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, tell us more about what you're learning.
Yeah, this is a committee that has actually operated on a bipartisan basis for much of the past year, issuing reports done with Republicans and Democrats alike, even agreeing over a key matter that has been rejected by House Republicans, that whether the Russians, in fact, did interfere in the 2016 elections with the express intention to help Trump win the presidency, something that the U.S. intelligence community asserted back in January of 2017. Well, on this issue about whether or not there were Trump campaign associates working to collude with Russians in an effort to sway the elections, that is an issue that is still dividing this committee along party lines, despite more than a year of investigation. We had a chance to interview virtually all of the members on this committee, and right now we are hearing a division along party lines. Republicans saying they just do not see the evidence yet to support the notion of Trump-Russia collusion. Democrats, on the other hand, say there's plenty of evidence to suggest there was at least intention to collude, and there are a lot of questions and concerns about problematic contacts that occurred between Trump campaign associates and Russians. And Wolf, one thing that is prompting concerns about from members from both sides of the aisle is that they believe that they're not getting as much information as the Mueller probe is getting, and that Mueller may be the one who's ultimately going to be the one to decide whether or not there was collusion between campaign associates and the Russians, because of the feeling that perhaps they're not able to just simply get nearly the amount of details and information that the special counsel is doing, leaving the big question to Robert Mueller about what exactly happened in the 2016 campaign, Wolf.
Manu, the president also warning in a tweet yesterday about the Mueller probe meddling with the midterm elections in November. Can the Senate release their final report without interfering with this fall's elections?
Well, this is a big question internally. Right now, a debate is going on about whether or not to release any sort of finding before the 2016 midterms because of concerns that perhaps it will not be viewed credibly from the public because it'll be in the heat of the campaign season, or concerns that it could impact what will happen in the 2016 campaign. Some Republicans, like Susan Collins of Maine, saying it's not a good idea to release this in the run-up to the elections. Even Democrat Joe Manchin is concerned about how it will be looked politically. Ultimately, this is going to be a question for Richard Burr, the chairman of the committee, Mark Warner, the vice chairman. Both of them would not say explicitly whether or not that specific report will come out before November, but they do plan to put forward some other narrowly targeted reports, including how the Obama administration dealt with Russia meddling back in 2016. But on this key issue of collusion, it appears that it'd be something as a sticking point. It may not be resolved at least before November, Wolf.
All right, Manu, thank you. Manu Raju with the latest up on Capitol Hill. Joining us now, Congressman Eric Swalwell. He's a Democrat. He serves on the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. And let me get to that issue of collusion. Legally, all the legal experts suggest it isn't necessarily a crime. So how do you reach a definition that members of both parties can agree on?
Great question, Wolf. And the way I see it is you have to separate this from what you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's Bob Mueller's job. And just general collusion, which is offensive and concerning. I've seen plenty of evidence of collusion. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to have access to classified information. When the Russians conduct a hacking and then they offer to preview the proceeds of the hacking to Trump family members, Trump campaign members, Trump business associates, and the Trump team moves heaven and earth to take those meetings, doesn't tell a single law enforcement official in the world about them, and then the candidate goes on stage and says, Russia, please do more. To me, they were eager to work with the Russians. Now, what all of that amounted to, that's Bob Mueller's job, and I hope we allow him to do that job so he can tell the American people as soon as possible.
Yesterday, the president accused the Mueller investigation of meddling in the midterm elections, and now Rudy Giuliani just gave us some more context. Would Robert Mueller risk unduly influencing the midterm elections if he were to release his report, let's say after September, the timeline the president and his defenders are pushing?
No, Wolf, and he should do all he can to just follow the evidence and tell the American people what he's found as soon as he has found it. We've certainly seen in the past that when you consider the political consequences, whether you're intending to interfere with a political election or not, that it could be perceived that way. But boy, does this sound familiar from the president suggesting that the election is going to be rigged. This is what he said back in 2016. It got in the head of the Obama administration officials. I think they were a little gun shy about telling the American people what the Russians were doing, and the Russians were able to do more. I hope if there is meddling from the Russians this time, that our intelligence leaders identify it and attribute it to the Russians immediately, and not to worry that you're playing into the hands of this president's obstructive objective, which is to just stop the Mueller investigation.
Let's talk about the recordings seized in the Michael Cohen raid in New York. How relevant are these tapes potentially to understanding President Trump's actions and the actions of the people around him?
Very relevant, Wolf. I think it shows what we've all known, which is that the president and Michael Cohen are shadowy operators. I don't think most Americans give a rip about what the president did in his personal life. But if he did act this way with respect to his business deals, or he has acted this way in the past with Russians that he's worked with, especially while they were interfering in our elections, that's something we would want to know. Thankfully, the Department of Justice is using their subpoena power to obtain this evidence. But I still hope that the Senate, as you alluded to earlier, that they're using their subpoena power, because the House Republicans wouldn't use our subpoena power to look into these types of communications, bank records, and travel records. It's all knowable, and if you're interested in knowing, we can tell the American people, and it will better protect us, I think, in the future.
As you know, Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, is drumming up a lot of attention, a lot of drama around all of this. Do you worry, though, that that potentially makes it more difficult for Americans to understand the facts?
Yeah, Wolf, I don't think that Michael Avenatti should be able to reach into an ongoing criminal investigation, just as I don't think that Devin Nunes should be able to reach into an ongoing criminal investigation, as he and Trey Gowdy and others were trying to do just a few weeks ago. The law enforcement investigation is paramount to any other legal proceeding, and so we should let the police examine the evidence that they obtained and then use that in the way that they need to, and then of course when due time comes, they can use that in the civil proceedings. But I don't think anyone should try and obstruct or reach into any ongoing criminal investigation.
The New York Times reporting that last year President Trump actually asked his Attorney General Jeff Sessions to reverse his decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. Do you believe that potentially could be obstruction of justice?
I do, Wolf. And many people who defend the president will say, well, how could he be so stupid to do this over and over? You know, how could he be so stupid to admit that he obstructed by firing James Comey and telling Lester Holt? How could he be so stupid to invite the Russians to hack? And I go back and forth on whether he's just so careless and reckless in the way that he does this, or whether he is so bold and he believes that nobody is going to stop him. He has Republicans in Congress who has given him nothing but green lights, and he figures he'll just keep pushing the boundaries. Well, we're not helpless. Whether he's careless or whether he's bold, we certainly have a Constitution to protect, and it's time for Republicans and Democrats to unite as he continues to obstruct justice in broad daylight.
The president, once again today, has some ugly words about his attorney general. He announced today he wishes he had picked a different attorney general to begin with. So why do you think he simply hasn't fired Jeff Sessions?
It's the public sentiment, Wolf. It's the people who have spoken up, who don't normally follow politics, who are writing their congressmen and senators and asking them to protect the Mueller investigation. And he knows that if he were to fire Jeff Sessions, I don't think he'd be able to get an attorney general through the Senate, at least not one that he would like. He wants somebody who's going to be a loyalist to him, not somebody who's going to be a loyalist to our Constitution. So I don't really give him much credit here. I think he's been backed into a corner, but I do think that his efforts to try and shame Attorney General Sessions does amount to obstruction, and that it is being looked at by the special counsel, that he does this at public press conferences, he does this at public rallies, and he's doing it on Twitter. It seems that he's trying to make Jeff Sessions do something that he knows he can't, which is to resign.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thanks as usual for joining us.
Of course, my pleasure.
Just ahead is the president waiting to see what Robert Mueller does before he fires Jeff Sessions. We're going to talk about that. And also about the president's response to the Roseanne firestorm. Why is the man who refuses to apologize now expecting an apology?